Since I've come out with my big reveal, some of you have asked me how I got diagnosed, why I got diagnosed, why I went to the doctor, all of those things. So this might be a bit of a long video because it's a lot to say, but yeah, I just thought it would be good to share this because it is quite remarkable and unexpected, and that's certainly how I felt when I was diagnosed. So, for most people that I've heard or read about, because I've only met actually two people with Parkinson's disease before, but I've read a lot, I've watched a lot of webinars, and I've heard people's diagnosis stories. And many of them say they were misdiagnosed for many years, especially those with young onset Parkinson's disease or early onset Parkinson's disease, which is what I have. So anyone diagnosed before the age of 50 is considered to have young onset Parkinson's disease or YOPD. And I was diagnosed before 40. So I was extra young and extra unique. But a lot of people seem to say they were misdiagnosed for many years. They went to several doctors. They had some sort of, major ache or small tremor or shake or something weird going on. And they went to doctors, and most of the doctors would say it's some sort of orthopedic injury or sports injury or just something unusual, and not to worry too much about it, but that it was just something random that was not serious. And for many people, it took them a long time to get diagnosed. My experience was completely opposite. I had no symptoms, or so I thought. I was totally shocked because a lot of people kind of expect something and they want to be told something. They want to have a diagnosis so they could better understand their situation. But for me, I was incredibly healthy, I thought, and I thought I was fine. But the situation was that I was working in Greece. I had moved back to the United States in 2015. I was working for a nonprofit that does refugee assistance around the world. And I was sent to Greece to set up a legal aid office, a clinic, and a legal aid assistance office so that refugees, which were coming from Turkey to Greece, trying to get into Europe, could get legal assistance and legal aid. This was 2015, 2016, when so many refugees, especially Syrians, were coming from Turkey into Europe. So that was a really exciting opportunity. My office in DC sent me over there to set up this office and to train people and to get things going and to do this work. So I was over there the summer of 2016. And I was working crazy long hours. I was working 12, 15, sometimes 20 hours a day. I was managing a bunch of staff. I was setting up a bunch of procedures and systems. And I was helping a bunch of refugees, which were coming over on boats at the time and really needed assistance. So I would have dinners at like 11 o'clock at night. For those of you who know Greek islands, you know this is not unusual. I was on the island of Lesbos, and we would have dinner, it was the summer, so we'd have dinner at like 11 p.m., sometimes midnight, outside at these lovely seafood, awesome restaurants. So I would pour water or pour something to drink for myself and my colleague who had also come over from DC. And my right hand would shake ever so slightly, just every once in a while, just on some dinners, just, on the particularly long days when I hadn't slept much, I hadn't eaten much, I had drank tons of caffeine, tons of coffee. So that's what I thought was the issue, or maybe not even an issue at all. I didn't think it was a problem. But my colleague said, you should really go get that checked out. So I did not think anything of it. And I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, so I Google things and I think there's always something wrong with me. And this time I was sure there was nothing wrong with me. I knew it was because I wasn't taking good care of myself. I knew it was because I was working a lot. And so when I came back to the United States, to DC for a week to renew my visa, get go to my niece's baptism and vote, because it was fall of 2016, I thought I might as well just make a doctor's appointment. I had health insurance. I was excited to use it. And so I booked an appointment on ZocDoc, and I booked it for a neurologist, not because I thought there was anything wrong with me, but because I never went to the doctor and I never need to go to the doctor. So to me as an adult, I knew there were pediatricians for kids. I knew there were OBGYNs for adult women. And I knew for anything else, you go to a neurologist, or at least so I thought, because that's, if there's something strange going on or something that doesn't fit in any other specialist category, then you go there. So I made an appointment. I went to the doctor. I voted on Tuesday. I Donald Trump was elected Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Wednesday, nobody went to work. I lived in Capitol Hill at the time, and everyone are workaholics, and yet everyone was so shocked and so traumatized that Wednesday of that week, no one went to work. Everyone was walking around like zombies in their sweatpants and walking their dogs, just kind of shocked about the election results and really nervous about what was to come next because so many people worked for nonprofits or on Capitol Hill, so many people worked for political offices, and it was a very strange political time. So that was the context in which I went to the doctor. I went to the doctor on Thursday of that week. I sat in the waiting room, which was a neurologist's office, like I said, and I looked around at the people that had all sorts of problems. They had all sorts of neurological problems. They were not moving properly. They weren't speaking properly. Some of them were in wheelchairs. Some were drooling. There were just like a lot of issues that I did not have. And so I looked around and I really thought, you know what? I'm so lucky that I'm perfectly healthy. I'm 35 years old. I'm working a job I love. I live in a country I love. That was Greece at the time. And I was just at the height of my career in life. And I just thought, I'm so glad I have health insurance. I can use it to pay a copay of $40 to be told I'm fine, that I drink too much coffee, that I work too much, and to take better care of myself. And that was it. So when I got called into the doctor, I did a bunch of little tests. They're not diagnostic tests, they're motor tests, which those of you who have Parkinson's know what they are. You uh, tap your fingers like this. You can see I can't do it very well. You tap your fingers like that. You walk up and down a hallway. They move your arms and legs, and that's about it. And I thought I aced it. I had no symptoms. I thought I was fine. I had no issues at all. And I was more than 100% sure I was fine. Well, the doctor was also teaching a student how to do these things. So again, I thought these people are really lucky. They get to have a nice, talkative, happy go lucky woman in here who's healthy and has no problems, but they can, the doctor can teach the student how to do these tests. I get peace of mind, they get to teach, and we're done. Well, that is not what she said. She said, you have Parkinson's disease. And it took her 5 minutes to make that diagnosis. And I was floored. I can't even begin to tell you how shocked I was. I had seen a movie. I don't know if those of you who have watched it can remember, but there's a movie called Love and Other Drugs. And it's about a young woman with early onset Parkinson's disease. The young woman is Anne Hathaway. The guy in the movie is Jake Gyllenhaal. And it's kind of a drama, kind of a comedy, not really sure which. And so, yeah, it's not a particularly memorable movie, but it was memorable for me because I remember when I watched it, like more than 15 years ago, I thought, this is what a good movie should be, a movie where you feel really intense emotions. You feel like you are, living in that person's shoes. You feel the feelings they feel and you feel significant empathy for them. But then you walk out of the movie or turn off the movie, and that's not your life and that is not your reality. And you can breathe a sigh of relief. So that's what I remember thinking when I saw that movie. And I remember thinking that would be my biggest nightmare in the world. That would be my worst nightmare ever. That would be the last thing I would want to deal with. That would be absolutely terrible. Well, fast forward 15 years, and that was my life. That's what I was being told. And so I was shocked. And the doctor tried to talk to me about it. I was in tears. I was in denial. I said, I've got to go back to work. I was, a workaholic. So I thought, I got to get back to my office. This cannot be true. This cannot be real. And honestly, I have some pretty realistic dreams sometimes. And so I thought, this is actually a nightmare. Donald Trump was elected the day before. So obviously, if I consider that a nightmare, my politics. And yeah, and so he was elected the day before. The next day, I'm being told I have Parkinson's disease. And I thought, this is probably a really realistic dream. I'm definitely going to wake up from this because none of this can be true. This is totally outside the realm of possibility. It's totally wacky and it's just nuts. So, yeah, I waited to wake up and I never did. So, I went out to the street corner. I called my boyfriend, Andrew, who I had been dating for about a year at the time, who was in Colorado, and I said, this is what's going on. And he, was on the phone, so I couldn't tell, but he was shocked too. Next thing I did was call my best friend who lived in DC at the time and still does. And I said, you have to meet me in person immediately. He left his office. We met at a cafe. I told him, and we were both just shocked and devastated. Um, I then called my parents and told them, I went back to my office, tried to just ignore it and, pretend like that didn't happen. And then I called my parents and said, I have to talk to you guys in person. They lived in the suburbs, and so I drove out to the suburbs that night, and they were excited for my news. They said, you're engaged. I said, no. They said, you're pregnant. I said, no. They said, well, what is it? And I said, this is not something good. Just stop giving all those good ideas. I have Parkinson's disease. And they said, that is not possible. They also were in shock and denial. They said, we have intuition when there's something wrong with our kids, and we do not feel like this is, true. It's not the case. We don't really think it's true, and you don't have to worry about it because we'll figure out what it is, and it must be something else. So they called the doctor. They told her, they told her that they didn't think this was possible, and I was too young, and all the things. And she said, of course, you're welcome to get a second opinion, but this is what I think. So they didn't have time to do an MRI because this was Thursday. I was leaving to go back to Greece on Saturday. And so they said, we should do an MRI, but we don't have time to. So don't worry about it. Just go back to do your work, go back to your life. There's nothing you can do about Parkinson's disease. It will only get worse. And there's no medication to slow or stop the progression. So just go live your life. So I went back to Greece and I spent the next 2 months Googling Parkinson's disease, and it was terrifying. But at the same time, I tried to convince myself that this wasn't the case, that they would figure out what's wrong with me and it would be something else and it wouldn't be a big deal. And I could, rest assured that I didn't have a problem. And it was hard because I was managing a bunch of staff. I had no friends there except for one staff member. And I couldn't tell anyone, of course, because I was the boss. And yeah, it was really difficult. So I flew from Greece straight to the Mayo Clinic in January 2017. I met my partner, Andrew, and my parents. We all stayed in an Airbnb in Rochester, Minnesota in the freezing cold, obviously in January. And my parents got to know my boyfriend. My boyfriend got to know my parents. And it wasn't the circumstances I had wanted. But I did tests for a week. And I did tests every day. It was inconclusive. They did all sorts of things until the very last day I was there on a Friday. And they did what's called a DAT scan. And a DAT scan is not usual for people to get, but for a case like mine that was so unique and not expected at my age, they did the DAT scan, which is a brain scan, and it came back and they showed me, the doctor stayed late after 5:30 to tell us that, to show us the brain scan, show us the left side of my brain was not lighting up the way it should, which affected the right side of my body, of course, and that it was definitive and that he was really sorry to say, but I had Parkinson's disease. And that brain scan will stay with me forever. To see your brain not lighting up the way it should is very disturbing. So I left, flew back to DC. The next day, friends of mine came in town to do the Women's March in Washington because I lived right by the Capitol. And then Donald Trump was inaugurated. That was January 20th, 2017. And I lived with it from then on. And for the first few years, I didn't take any medication. I didn't really have any problems, but I kept it to myself and just worked really hard and just threw myself into work because I didn't know how long I could work. And it was terrifying, but I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want any stigma or issues, or, I didn't want to be seen as different. And so that was that. And then, yeah, since then I've been to other doctors. Of course, they all say the same thing. Now I'm on medication. I try to live the best I can. I'm, trying to manage it in the ways that I should. But that is how I was diagnosed. That's why I was diagnosed. That's how it happened. And again, it's very different than other people who seem to think they knew something was wrong and they were just trying to figure out what it was, and they would go from doctor to doctor. I went into a doctor perfectly, again, happy go lucky, just in such an optimistic, happy mood, looking forward to the future, and walked out of there with a very different life trajectory ahead of me. So that's the way it is. And now I'm just going to try to keep talking about it, keep educating people about it, and just, you know, uh, help others understand what it is, and help those who have it understand that we can still thrive. That's it.